You weren't big, Ben, but you still took me apart. I remember the first time I met Ben, as clearly as if it happened yesterday. My life then was a neat little box of routines, a predictable cycle of work, coming home to my quiet apartment, microwaving dinner, and watching television until I fell asleep. At 32, I had convinced myself that peace came from control, from keeping my emotions tucked away like fragile china in a cupboard no one was allowed to open. Then, out of nowhere, Ben walked into my world like someone opening a window in a room that had been shut up too long. I met him on a rainy Thursday night at the small bookstore where I always went after work. I never intended to speak to anyone. That store was my sanctuary. I wandered to the aisle with travel books, imagining all the places I'd never been brave enough to see. It was there, with my hand on a glossy book about the Grand Canyon, that I noticed someone standing right next to me. He was tall, with a frame that wasn't imposing but somehow still filled the space around him. He wore a gray hoodie, the sleeves pushed up, revealing tanned forearms. There was a little water dripping from his hair, as though he'd just come in from the rain. When he looked at me, he smiled, but it wasn't a flashy smile. It was simple, like he was genuinely glad to see me even though we were strangers. "Thinking of traveling?" he asked, nodding toward the book in my hand. I don't know why, but I answered honestly instead of brushing him off like I normally would. "Thinking, yes," I said. "Actually doing it? Probably not." His eyes lit up with a kind of warmth that caught me off guard. "Maybe thinking is the first step," he said, his voice soft, with a slight southern drawl. That was the first time in years I felt someone actually heard me. For some reason, I didn't want the moment to end. We stood there for a while, talking about places we dreamed of visiting. I learned his name was Ben Carter. He'd just moved to town 2 months ago after leaving a job that burned him out. He said he came to that bookstore when it rained because the sound of water hitting the windows made him feel less lonely. It was strange how quickly conversation flowed between us. I remember leaving that night with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, like a door had cracked open in a room I'd locked a long time ago. Over the weeks that followed, I found myself going back to that bookstore more often. And every time, it was like fate kept putting him there. Sometimes we'd just talk about books or places. Other times, we'd sit at the small coffee shop in the back and linger over cups of coffee, telling each other things we didn't tell anyone else. He told me about his childhood in Texas, about how his parents divorced when he was 12, about the way he always felt like he never quite fit in. I told him about my fear of change, about the way my heart still carried scars from a relationship that had ended badly years ago. Ben wasn't flashy or perfect. He didn't have that overwhelming presence some people carry, the kind that fills up all the oxygen in a room. No, he was subtle, like a slow burn. And somehow, he saw right through the armor I'd built around myself. The night everything changed started with a phone call. My younger sister had been in a car accident in another city. She was okay, but the news rattled me so badly that I didn't know what to do. My hands shook as I tried to process the hospital's words. Before I even thought about it, I called Ben. He picked up on the second ring, and I couldn't even form words at first. "Emily," he said, his voice instantly serious. "Talk to me. What's wrong?" My sister," I stammered. "She had an accident. I don't know. I can't think." "I'm coming," he said without hesitation. An hour later, he was at my apartment. When I opened the door, I was a mess, my hair tangled, my face streaked with tears. He didn't say anything at first. He just wrapped his arms around me and held me, and something inside me broke open. For years, I had been holding myself together with nothing but willpower, but in that moment, I let go. I cried against his chest until my voice was raw, until the sound of his slow, steady heartbeat began to calm me down. "Do you want me to drive you there?" he asked gently. I nodded, and we drove through the night. He didn't try to fill the silence with words. He just drove, his hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine. At the hospital, he stayed in the waiting room, even though he'd never met my family. He waited until I came out hours later and told him my sister was going to be okay. That was the moment I realized how rare it is to find someone who will sit with you in your pain without needing anything in return. After that night, something shifted between us. I started to see Ben differently. It wasn't about him being larger than life or sweeping me off my feet. It was about the way he made space for me, the way he made me feel like I wasn't carrying everything alone. Over time, we spent more and more evenings together. Sometimes it was at the bookstore, sometimes at a little diner he liked, and sometimes in my apartment, talking about nothing and everything. I found myself laughing more, breathing more easily. And then one night, while we were sitting on my couch watching an old movie, I felt his hand brush against mine. It was such a small thing, but it sent a jolt through me. Slowly, his fingers intertwined with mine. I turned to look at him, and he looked back at me, his eyes searching. "You know," he said softly, "I've been wanting to do this for a long time." I didn't answer with words. Instead, I leaned forward and for the first time, our lips met. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect. It was slow, hesitant, like we were both surprised at how natural it felt. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. That night, we stayed up talking until the sun came up, sitting so close I could feel the warmth of his shoulder against mine. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the safety I felt with him, a kind of safety I had convinced myself didn't exist. The months that followed were some of the happiest of my life. Ben and I built something quiet but solid. He showed me that love doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. He wasn't the biggest, the strongest, or the flashiest man. But he had a way of dismantling the walls I'd built. He didn't need to be big to take me apart piece by piece until I was no longer hiding from myself. I remember one particular evening in the fall. The leaves had started to turn, painting the streets in gold and crimson. We went for a walk in the park. I had been having a rough week at work, full of self-doubt and frustration. I told him everything, the way I always did, and he listened without judgment. Then he stopped walking, turned to me, and said, "Emily, you're stronger than you think. You've been holding the world on your shoulders for so long that you forgot you don't have to do it alone. Let me share some of that weight." Those words went straight to my heart. It was then I realized that what he had done from the very beginning was teach me how to trust again. He had taken apart all the layers of fear and doubt, and he had done it not with size or force but with patience and kindness. Loving Ben changed me. It taught me that love isn't about someone being larger than life. It's about someone who sees the parts of you that no one else bothers to look at and says, "I'm not going anywhere.